I hope it's better now.
It's still quite far away.
Must be better, no? No?
This is it.
Yeah,
Still?
it is good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Maybe we'll wait for a minute, but while we wait, I'll just quickly set the context because this is a very special day, and we are essentially starting knowledge series under the IGDA SIG incubation banner. The purpose of knowledge series is to essentially share expert insights, practical advice to help everybody to you know enhance the effectiveness of gaming incubators, accelerators globally, and also to create a learning community where we can exchange ideas and we can drive innovation through through experiences we've had uh, over these years. And today we are starting this episode one, and I couldn't, there could not be anybody better than JP, who's been at the forefront of building gaming cluster over almost 2 decades. And I mean, we all know about him, so he needs no introduction. But super excited, JP, to start off with you. This is the first session. I hope, I mean, we'll anyways be recording this session for everybody too, because a lot of people wrote back once they got to know about this. A lot of people wrote back in terms of them wanting to attend, but having conflict with their schedules. And so we'll be recording and sharing it and broadcasting it because this is something we want to do as part of this knowledge series. And yeah, so I think that's the JP's experience. He's been running MD and founder of Dutch Game Garden. So he will definitely help us understand the evolution challenges and the ups and downs of managing a gaming cluster. So over to you. The floor is to you, JP, and we can start. I'll be putting off my video, uh, but I'll be around. Yeah, over to
Okay.
you, JP, and thanks for everyone for joining us for this first session. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, you think I can get started? Yeah. All right. Well,
absolutely,
good morning.
absolutely. Thank
Yeah,
you.
good morning, everybody. I'm going to start a presentation to make sure that it works. I checked it already with Nipun, but I think it works. So, and then I will do some introduction. Let's see. Share. Can people see my start slide?
Yes.
Yeah. So I can get started, right?
Yes.
Okay, because I cannot see you anymore. So if you guys look angry, then I won't be able to see it. Um, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I have put this together in a time that's a bit crazy for us. We are in the middle of trying to understand how to stop an organization like this. So I have gathered some slides and stuff from the past and some things that I think are worth sharing. I will spend some time on explaining about Dutch Game Garden, but also about the Dutch game industry landscape, about our relationship with government, and about our funding structure. And then I will explain a little bit about what happened to us and why we had to come to the decision to close. Um, and then I will leave room for questions. We have till quarter after 10, I think, so I will try and do this in about 35, 40 minutes. I tend to have a lot of slides, but I tend to go through them rather quickly. And I'd be happy to share this slide deck with the people that are here today. Okay?
Yes. Thank
I don't,
you.
yeah, we helped. For the video, for the sake of the video, let me start over. Hang on. Okay. So from now on, we can start over, and then that way you can cut out this little thing in the beginning. So Dutch Game Garden. Hi, I'm JP. I joined Dutch Game Garden in September 2008. We were open doors in January 2008. Thus far, we've helped 170 companies with housing, 150 with incubation. We've done events and matchmaking and agency services in a formal matter. And then we have, of course, connected in matchmaking probably more like 1,000 people by email and other things in the 17 years that we've worked. Also, we distinguish between business center and incubation. Business center is where you rent in our building, and incubation is where you follow the program, and that's not necessarily the same companies. In our business center, there are also very experienced companies who want to be close to the scene, and that kind of adds to the mix of young and old. This is one of our mission statements. We are funded and founded and funded from an originally regional purpose for economic development. And yeah, that's always been our goal, but we've always approached it on a national level. So we've always played a fundamental role in the national Dutch industry. A little bit about my background. I'm part of Dutch Game Garden. I've also been connected to HKU School of the Arts, Breda University, and in the Dutch Creative Council, which is an advisory committee about creative industry in general. My background is in industrial design and 3 years of mechanical engineering in the US. And I got into games through the 3D modeling at the Design Academy. I worked on games as Knight Rider, as a level builder and level designer. And I worked on mobile games for a while in the times before the iPhone, so before the touch. So I pixeled art and I designed. So I come from the game development pipeline, and then I co-founded a studio called W Games in Amsterdam, with privately funded, and I grew it from 4 people to 35. And we launched the game with Atari in 2007. And today this studio has morphed and changed many times, and now it's called Vertigo Games Amsterdam, and it's a VR studio. And I worked there for 3 years, and it helped me sort of get in touch with also the business development and entrepreneurial side of game development. When I present to our local government or government in general, I always show them this slide. It's about the rise of the basically the income of games. And it matches up with a couple other slides coming up. This is sort of an old slide, but it kind of shows how games have sort of taken off from the other two dominant entertainment media. It's always really important to show this, I think, to our stakeholders to understand what the impact is of our industry. Most of you know these. This is the Dutch industry, so this is the number of companies, and you can see sort of a stark growth starting around 2005, which has to do with the emergence of the mobile industry, the emergence of digital distribution. Basically, you could build a game again with 2 people. And in the Netherlands, also with the impact of game education. So a lot of programs started around 2003, and that also gave rise to a new generation of game companies. Dutch Game Garden has also been involved in the producing of this monitor, which is the data about the Dutch industry. You have to know that our branch organization at the time was small and very few members, no feet on the ground. So we took upon ourselves to do this part. So we've delivered the numbers for the last, since 2012. And you can see a rise of companies since we started. So sort of doubled in size since we've been around. Some of the snapshot of the Dutch industry, we have roughly about 5,000 jobs, annually about 700 graduates, 630 companies, and our revenue is about 440 million. That's small, but it's just doubled over the time that we started. It's sometimes hard to explain to governments the impact of the size, but they do see the impact of the content that we build and the visibility of the companies. The regions in the Netherlands, we are in Utrecht, so we're the second largest region of jobs in the game industry. And with Amsterdam, you have to take into account there's Guerrilla Games and Azerion, which can count together already for 1,200. So that kind of is a slanted graph. We have an equal number of companies in Utrecht registered. These are the 3 phases the Dutch industry went through. The first phase, it was mainly company growth. The second phase, it was mainly job growth. And the third phase, it was mainly turnover, which somewhat of a sign of maturing in the industry. And here's an indication of all the research or all the educational programs in the Netherlands focusing on games. It's quite a lot. Mind you, the Netherlands has 18 million people. And there's a lot of institutions offering programs related to games. We are right dead center of the Netherlands. We have 12 provinces in the Netherlands, and Utrecht province and the city with the same name are dead center. That gives us an opportunity to be very centrally located in our events. We're always easy to visit for everybody in the Netherlands. It's been an advantage in our case. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the organization Dutch Game Garden. I think it's important to know that we really shouldn't be calling ourselves an incubator, because incubation is only a small part of what we do. We are better defined as a game cluster. And I think it's an important distinction. And we believe that the way that we've stacked activities has been the reason why we've been able to impact so many companies in so many ways. Just a few companies, so you know, Rios by Abbey Games is one of our companies. Hands on Deck is a new company, started a few years ago from university, and it's a game that's coming out soon. Then there's DeLorean here created a horse reality. It's a horse breeding simulation. It's a game free to play, and she runs a team of about 30 people worldwide. And she turns over about between 20 and 50,000 a month with this game. It's really fascinating, and it's really a big popular among real lovers of horses, and it's quite realistic. So it's really about what happens if you crossbreed certain horses, and what and how can you progress with that. Then we have a Roblox company in our building that's specialized in running games in Roblox. We have, in the past, we had Hidden Folks by Adrian de Jong, who's an independent game developer. This is another fun game from one of the companies. It's called Push Your Family. This company, unfortunately, is gone broke, so that also happens. Vlambeer, Luftrausers, some of you still remember Vlambeer, one of our most prolific visible companies in the past. Tovertafel. The Tover is an application it's basically a projector projecting games on tables. Started with helping elderly and demented in the last phase of dementia to reactivate. They respond very well to this music and motion, and it's one of a beautiful, successful company. This company grew from 3 to 35 while they were in Dutch Game Garden, which is really exciting to see. And they're selling this product now worldwide. It's a nice balance of business success, creative success, and social success. Soul Paint, another interesting artsy game. So this is more on the art side. We've always had a bunch of companies sort of veering out into, this is a VR 3D experience. Then Station to Station currently came out last year. It's a company by Joost van Dongen, who is one of our early incubators, who used to be one of the co-founders of Ronimo Games, and makes a really cool game. So we are in the same school as these kinds of organizations have been around for a while. We've collaborated in the past with Sweden Game Arena and Game Hub Denmark through an Erasmus project. We've always stayed in touch with others like Game BCN. About incubation, this is roughly how I would position us as our incubation efforts. First is, for example, Game Founders, which is a commercial organization. We've never had a fund, so we've never funded companies. So we're typically slow, regional, long-term, year-round program. And a lot of accelerators usually have money at the end of the, say, 6 months or 3 months period, and then it's very investor focused. So it's a different approach. We've helped a lot of companies who never used private money. That's just a different focus. I think if I look at soccer, which is a great metaphor for pretty much everything in life, I think what I'd noticed with accelerators, they're usually focused on the visible, very visible front attack. But I think for a successful economy in a country or in a region, you need to cover all 11 positions. So I think we've also sometimes called ourselves a community incubator, where we build a community that accelerates itself as well. So something that bothers me sometimes about startup programs is that they only focus on the investor-ready companies, while it's been proven in reports that 2/3 of our Dutch national economy runs on companies who are not investor ready, so who will never be invested into. They are just, but they provide stability of our economy. So there's a little bit of a slant towards only investment ready programs, because you only focus on a small part of the companies that matter. Another thing that you guys all know, it's really Utrecht Inc. is the startup incubator in our city that's focused on tech startups and general scalable stuff. What's really, of course, always a slide that I use for government to explain the difference and why would you need game incubation, is that uh, all in, except with exception for maybe the serious games companies and some others, we focus on entertainment, and we don't focus on market solutions. Most startup incubation programs or accelerators are focused on market solutions. So the first question they'll ask always is, what's the market problem you're trying to solve, and what's your solution? And this is exactly why we need game incubators, because the whole reason to make games is starts already being different. And this is sometimes hard to explain to outsiders. And sometimes I try to use this slide to kind of underline that. I think what our vision after a while we discovered, let's not just be an incubator. We're creating a cluster, and that will accelerate through the power of a community. So 8 elements of Dutch Game Garden. It's an incubation program. I'll tell a little more about that later. Then a business center where people can rent. That is separate from incubation. So the incubator I mentioned just before here, Utrecht Inc., basically people can only be in their building when they're part of the program, and then when they're out of the program, they leave. That's not the case in our situation. People can rent with us for 5 years if they want, and we will use experienced companies to help mentor the inexperienced companies. So our program is separate from location, from housing. Innovation means research projects. Monitor is the report I mentioned before. Network Lunch is quietly the most successful, most impactful thing we've done. It's the simplest and the most impactful. If I only had budget to do one thing regionally, I would start with a network lunch. A couple of rules: do it always the first day or the same day of the month, and hand out some free food and do some game demos and do an introduction round. And it's one of the most successful things we've done. Then Indigo is an event some of you've been to. Lynn, you spoke at it this year, so you know what it's become. It started as a little Indigo, as a little showcase, and it became a full-fledged event. Then we're Knowledge Center for people who have questions about games, and we've helped the Dutch government with international acquisition, getting other companies to choose the Netherlands over, say, Berlin or what else, if they're considering an office in Europe. Part of our job has been to convince them, of course, to come to the Netherlands. So we have, well, these are some old numbers, but anyway, I've been updating a lot of this stuff recently, so this changes all the time. I think the main thing is we cover about 1,200 people on the lunches annually, and we average 800 people to Indigo and such. Incubation, as I say, is not only what we do. There are many ways to do it. I've been in the past, and this is maybe 10 years ago, to Sweden Game Arena. I've been talking to the Danes. I know what Game BCN a little bit. We at one point decided to have our own approach. But when I was talking with Sweden Game Arena once, we agreed together that the people that we try to help, they don't know what they don't know. They're young, it's just like teaching, right? Anybody here who teaches students, you know, you're going to run into an attitude based on a lack of knowledge. And so that's always a bit hard to them. That they also won't always take your word for value. So that's a challenge. And some of the things that we've had to do is basically convince people, and then after 10 years they finally agree with you. So that's part of education. That's part of running an incubator. We ended up, we've done different things. We've done sessions for 6 weeks or for 8 weeks, but with the problem of aligning enough companies to do it, people tend to sort of come throughout the whole year, not just out of school. Lately, we've had more companies started by people who've had a job for 10 years and then started companies. So in the end, we ended up making incubation a monthly process, 1 day, really intense. On the right is an example of one of those days. We use a lot of experts. We find it's powerful if experts give their a piece of the explanation, because they have an authority that supersedes ours, and it gives us the chance to have a nice conversation about things like that. We do peer reviews on each other's presentations and business cases, pitch training a couple times a year, also towards a demo day with pitch training towards investors or publishers. Focus is mainly on business. A lot of the companies already have a lot of development experience, or at least the schools they went to only focused on development, so we don't try to cover that as well. We also did field trips every year, visiting a couple studios. We use Discord as main channel, visiting events together, and in between coaching where necessary. And one word I didn't add here, which I could, was called intervention. Once in a while, there was a crisis where we would get involved and get them connected to either legal advice or anything else, help them sort things out. It's in that sense a low effort program. It's once a month, really intense day. As you can see in the middle of the day, it's the Dutch Game Garden Network lunch. That is always the same day. That way you get all this energy focused on this one day. In our case, the first Wednesday of the month. It's worked really well there. In the lunch, you can connect even the incubees to some visitors or other business cases or business or talent. A lot of talent have found their first internship or job through the network lunch. So the network lunch has been almost like an axis running through everything we do to connect things. And Indigo has been an axis on an annual basis. Everything that we would run into during the year, we would somehow summarize during Indigo. People that we met, speakers, new companies, government looking for answers. We would always push that to its Indigo, which in that sense has worked really well. An article that I like, that I found early in the beginning when I was trying to figure out what am I going to do and who am I going to help and what's the deal. It's still fine. I checked yesterday. It's still online at Game Developer. It's called Mindy. Mindy's. So if you Google Mindy's on Game Developer without the brackets, then you'll find this article. It's kind of interesting. It describes the mindset of different kind of companies, and he makes a case. The writer makes a case for the Mindy, which is sort of the mainstream-oriented indie, somebody who's not afraid to say, "I also want to make some money." So the hardcore indie is more like an artist that doesn't care about money. And I think that we've been trying to get a Mindy mindset. It's an old article, but it's still fun to read. Then, when we look at incubation, there's 3 angles that we've approached, that we've used to analyze companies and different levels. So when it comes to people, we've looked at Canvas, which is a sort of a way to map out companies based on skills. Then we've used DISC as a personality training, because we do believe that personality plays a big part in the success or failure of a small group of people in a startup. And we've helped people to kind of explain through this model sort of how personalities can differ, where it adds to the understanding your co-founders more at a deeper level. and it can solve some stressful interpretations of things. And we've also noticed that there's something called deep motivation, which is sort of an underlying element of why do you want this company and what do you want to succeed. And deep motivation could differ in founders without them even knowing it. It's something that's even subconscious. So, for example, the reason we use this term is Game Oven was a company that was successful early in the early days of Dutch Game Garden, but the two founders ended the company and went each their own way. And they gave a presentation to finally, in the end, to explain to us what happened. And they said our deep motivation was different. One of them wanted to be a famous game designer, and the other one he wanted to be a technical wizard, creating extremely interesting technical stuff. And they didn't know that in advance, but they kind of discovered it, and their deep motivations didn't match. It was one of the reasons why they broke up as a company. So it's an interesting topic to explore, because some of it is subconscious, and that's something that founders will over time slowly discover about themselves, or will but sometimes never give it a name. So it's something that's interesting to explore. The Game Studio Canvas, practically as a simple little thing that I designed once when I started teaching game design. And I also next to my job as a game developer or a studio head, I taught a couple of classes at the HQU School of the Arts in the beginning, and this kind of helped me map out sort of the four major disciplines. And so and also sort of percentage wise in terms of the number of people that you need for it. And the arts I've sort of clustered as the classical arts. That's graphics, but it's also music, audio, and storytelling. And well, most of it you can read. The main thing for me was that game design should be in the center of this, because game design is connected to all the other disciplines. I've talked to a business developer once. He wanted to put the green thing in the center, and I said no, because the success of a game is really important, based on gameplay stickiness and its effect to connect all the other systems. So I've used this model in a few ways. I'll give you an example. Oh, by the way, this is the regional coverage of these skills. Those abbreviations UU and HQU and GLU, those are the schools in Utrecht region that are teaching either graphics or code or anything like that. And we had actually no real entrepreneurial education in games. We still don't. So the Netherlands still does not have one school that has an MBA or any kind of specific master's focus on business development, which is a shame. And I've been pitching this for the last 15 years, and nobody's picked it up yet. So, and I'm curious about other countries, but my something tells me that that this is not unique to the Netherlands. Then the canvas itself. So what I noticed, and I'll use the little feat of, let's say, 3 founders. If they come from an art school like HQ, this is sort of where their skills are, and they will always be focused on game design, not so much on the business. If they come from a tech school, then they'll have ugly programmer art, but they'll be fantastically technically suave, but they will still be focused mostly on game design. And I've had beautiful written business cases by people who don't know how to program, nor design, nor draw. So this is also a bit of out of balance. This, of course, has been a low number. These two have been the highest numbers of people, of companies' profiles. One thing is always very inward focused, always very much on the game and the game product, and not so much on how to sell it. It's a classical problem, and I'm sure that those here listening will recognize this. When I look at the green, I say, look, this part of it is internal management. Now, of course, with 3-4 people, that's not too complex. But when it grows, that becomes a challenge in itself. That's why we have producers these days, and business developers really focused towards the outside. What I noticed is that in order to get successful, one of the founders would sort of slowly take up the role of business development. And I call that maker entrepreneurship, basically the person who thought he started as a game designer, artist, and then realized, hey, I'm the only one who who feels responsible for this part, and I'm going to slowly do this, but it means I don't have time anymore to program and do art, and I'm the one pitching at events, and so this sort of happens usually naturally, but sometimes the person that is this person will slowly realize, hey, I'm actually end up doing most of my time, something that I wasn't really thinking of when I originally wanted to design games. So that's a challenge. And sometimes these people are really good at it because entrepreneurs doesn't mean they have to have a management degree. Sometimes it's an attitude, but it's definitely brings in something what I call the sacrifice. And I've seen this many, many, many times that the person realizes, whoa, I'm the one sacrificing the discipline that I love to for the sake of the company. Um, Theoretically, it'd be nice to bring someone else in with a management slash entrepreneurial degree. This has been one of my dreams to get this successfully launched, but it's so hard to get somebody new in after the little circle of trust after 3 years of doing projects at school. But I have seen this work in some cases. I call this MBA entrepreneurship. It's not quite true, but it's maybe somebody who's typically focused on the business, doesn't code, doesn't draw, doesn't design. Of course, loves games. That's usually a prerequisite. I wish I could start companies this way in year one at school, because then this person would be included in the circle of trust. It's a theory. I've never been able to try it, but it's still something that, because I felt sometimes at Dutch Game Garden that I was spending 17 years of my life fixing companies that started the wrong way. All right. Indigo, what can I say? It's a video. I'm just going to show it's a few minutes, but it gives you an idea. This started as a showcase event with just the best games from schools in the Netherlands, and it grew into a full-fledged event. I'm going to show you the video of last year, not this past year, but the one before. So I'm going to take a quick break and have a little water, and then you can watch this for a minute.
Did you have a good time today? It was like an amazing event. It's getting better every year. I'm so happy to hear. So thanks, guys.
It's really great. Last year we hired three really, really great graduates from Indigo.
I think Indigo 2023 is a great event. It's busier than ever. A lot of international guests. A great event for the Dutch industry.
I really like that I'm meeting so many new studios and new people that are working in the same industry and really close by. So it brings those two regions together.
All right. That was Indigo. And before I proceed to the next part of this presentation, Indigo has been really fundamental. It's some of you here, I recognize that you know what it is like to do an event. It's huge amount of work. And for a small organization, this sometimes would consume 90% of our efforts for 3-4 months. That's the disadvantage. We've often wondered, should we do this or should we try and find somebody to do this for us? It would be so nice if someone else did this event so we could focus on incubation and the cluster. but nobody ever stood up to do it, and we realized that it was so necessary. It's so necessary to bring the outside world to the Netherlands to meet with our indies and companies in general. And we needed also an organization, a place for the Dutch industry to meet them each other. So we never sacrificed it. We kept doing it, and we grew it to something that we're actually quite proud of. And it's double shame that we are going to have to discontinue this. But an event like this in a small industry, in a small company, to me, I still believe that it's very valuable. So that's why we kept doing it. And the next little part I want to talk about talking to government. We've always been publicly funded, so it's a lot about government. So I'm going to use some metaphors and some examples, share with you some things that I've learned in talking to government, and most of you will recognize this, and some of it is not new to you, but I will give you my experience, and hopefully this could be useful to those watching this presentation. Games. So if people look at the game industry from the outside, there's always two things that they always talk about: addiction and violence. I mean, I've run into this so many times in 17 years. I've sort of developed a second skin for this topic. I have some great quotes and ideas about how to tackle these two things, but what I learned was move the attention away from these topics and look at the full picture. The iceberg is way bigger than this. And I've always tried to emphasize some of the things that games will produce and the quality. And I can make this list endlessly. And the sad thing is that if you look at addiction percentages of things that people are addicted to in general, whether that is alcohol or even running or other things that are good for you, the percentages are exactly the same with everything else, and it has more to do with the humankind has a tendency to get addicted to certain things, and that can be social media and phones just as much as games in general. So, but it's always hard to take that discussion and because you end up only defending games, and you want to actually promote games. So I try to steer away from these discussions as in a positive way. So what I learned is that when people don't understand games, and then I'm talking about people in government who don't play games themselves, there's a tendency to think that serious gaming is the only safe and good way to go. And they always use the bad games as an example of why the industry of entertainment is risky. And we've struggled with this a lot. In the beginning, when I was promoting games, I would give serious game examples of really nice ways to use gaming, like, for example, the projection table for the elderly, the demented elderly. Um, but the problem with that is that they start getting it in their head that that's the only way to go, and they also somehow think that that's the only thing an incubation program should focus on. So sometimes it backfired on us. So what the last few years have been really trying to focus on the whole element of learning from games in general and the positive impact of games in general. So Schoola is a learning platform for kids in the Netherlands. So that's all safe and good. And then of course there's all these bad games on the right, murder, death, kill, which actually some of those I love to play. So I don't have a problem with that. But try and explain that to a podium full of people who are parents and who don't play games themselves. It's always tricky waters. But I have tried to focus on, like, look at my kids learn English. They both speak English quite well. They're 16 and 14 thanks to Roblox. They've collaborated with kids worldwide. There's so many things that they've learned from playing Roblox and Minecraft that I can't even begin to understand. But most of you who here know this, but it's always good to have some examples or to have some one-liners about the positive impact of games. I've also talked about games as a cultural, entertainment, and social phenomena. In the Netherlands, I would say that this is the percentages of companies. But to talk to people about culture, I was part of a cultural board for the government, and people would truly ask me, really, do you think games are culture? I mean, it's at that level. It's the same way people used to treat photography when it was first introduced. It's going to take a while still. I mean, I do see a positive change in this direction, but it's still going to take a little bit of time for our medium to be fully accepted. Also, I try to make a connection with all the things that we do. The government, I have make them aware of if you invest in games and in game incubation and invest in innovation. If you see it where our game tech these days is used, it's so broad that it's good for them to realize it all comes from mainly the entertainment industry, really, the entertainment game industry. Game design too. Principles of game design, engagement design, really, that's us. That's our industry. Business models as well, and IP. So I think these are some of the slides that I use when I try to convince government. Now, about the funding. We have been mainly funded by the Ministry of Economics, whether that's local, regional, or national. So in some countries, the Culture Ministry will fund incubation. The funding of culture in the Netherlands have been very fickle and unreliable the last few years. So we've tried to stay away from it just simply because there was no real opportunity and the requirements were sometimes so silly that it was just not realistic. I wish we would have a lot more out of culture, but yeah, the competition with film and other media in the Netherlands was too big, and our lobby was too weak. I think that one of the things that we as an industry had to learn the last few years is efficient lobbying towards national governments. We're still learning, but it's going to take a while. Some of the projects that when we started, these are the seasons of funding. First season was actually national and regional. Second was also regional, national with EU. Third was regional only, and the second and third, the fourth and fifth as well. And that was for a while okay. Although you don't want to know the struggles I had to go through to get this organized. So our goal was to go find national and EU money again. But we didn't manage. The last few years, I've had many conversations with national government about the role because I think we deserve to get paid for 40% by the national government because we do so much for the national industry. But I just never was able to find the right ministry or the right person or the right thing or the right program to get that organized. So in the end, I think what I learned is for anybody that is watching this, try to have at least 3 sources of funding. Try to be a tripod of stability. We had only 2, and then I was not able to manage the third in time. And this year, the second source pulled out. That's our province. They had 2 new people in leadership. They took a 180-degree different view on economic development for the region, and they wanted to focus only on social problems, fund startups with doing green tech or circular energy solutions, things like that. And there was no room for an actual ecosystem funding. So they came with a new program. They basically discontinued their funding starting this January, and they came with a new program that should be focused on those kinds of companies. And that was just too far out of our activities to proceed. And we only had 8 months to fix it, which is just too little. The relationship with the province had been complicated by some other things, also discussions about state aid for incubators. Some of the legal departments there thought that it was not legitimate to use state aid for incubators. It's a view that is very individual and not shared with the rest of Europe, but somehow it became a source of discussion for 5 years long. So the discussion with the province as a partner had been difficult for the last 5 years. There's a lot more I could say about this, but I think the complexity with our second partner in funding grew over the last 5 years and sort of culminated in this result. And I did not have an alternative lined up. Then, in the end, if I look at an ecosystem, whether it's games or something else, the work that you do is often invisible. When I ask people about engine parts, they will mention all sorts of parts that are physical, but nobody mentions the oil. And I think we have been the oil of an ecosystem in the Netherlands for the game industry and for the game industry and locally. But sometimes it's ungrateful work. Sometimes there's a lot of invisible work that you do, but without oil, this system will grind and come to a halt. Now, I wouldn't say that much. I know that the industry will continue in the Netherlands, but it's going to be certainly missed a lot. And now I want to leave the floor for questions because this has been quite a lot of information I have been spouting, and it's already 10 to 10. So I'm going to stop sharing this presentation and give people a chance to ask questions. Everybody's quiet.
Hey, hi. I don't know if you can hear me. It's David here.
Hi, David.
Hi. Thanks so much, JP, for the roll through of what you've been through. It's super interesting and educational. Thank you.
Okay.
So I work for NEOM in Saudi Arabia, and we're looking to set up. We've got an accelerator which has done fairly well in terms of results, but we're looking to get in earlier in the life cycle and set up an incubator. And one of the things we really struggle in Saudi Arabia is getting the right mix of founders into the teams, matchmaking them. I don't think it'll be unusual in other geos to, we get a lot of tech heads who are very kind of production focused. But also I think we lack entrepreneurial skills in the in KSA. So we lack in that. We lack in business skills as well. So I'd really love to understand your thoughts on matchmaking and how to do it in a very structured way, so that, instead of getting random people together who, all have a passion to create a game, great. How do we get a successful business going forward? And how would you think about matchmaking in that light?
Yeah. Very interesting question. Like I said, I think a lot of the matchmaking originally starts at university, and then the business element is usually lacking in that sort of mix. On the other hand, a university is a great place to start because people can work and collaborate together for a couple of years without having to perform business-wise, and that in some ways that's a beautiful thing about education. If you want to matchmake with a company starting with people who are already in a working environment or an industry, I have ideas about that, but I would try and mix those 4 disciplines and do boot camps together and rotate people, rotate them to see where the personal click is. Like I could envision a month-long rotating boot camps with different people and see which one, and have them continually produce games or game jams to see whether they understand each other, but also, and all of them every week they would have to present a business case as well, right? So I think there are ways to do this, but I've never been able to experiment this. So I have a lot of theory about it, but I've never been in a position to actually execute that kind of a thing. But my biggest thing with game companies is somebody who understands the creative spirit but has an entrepreneurial mindset. That is the biggest challenge with games companies, because they border on art. They are really, and some studios really work like art artists, and a true artist doesn't care about the money. They care about what they want to tell the world. Now, that's not always the most commercial angle, but sometimes it produces something amazing, like Minecraft. That didn't come from a business model, a canvas session. That came from a guy who had a passion and built something he wanted to build. And you need that. You need room for that. But how are you going to combine it with a person who respects that at the same time, is good at business? Lynn? Yeah.
I have another question. I just thought I put my hand up, but so if you want to continue the conversation, then
okay. Just making sure that David, did that answer your question? I mean,
no, it's good.
There's a world behind this question, David. And we could also have a separate call sometime if you want to dig into this deeper. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, JP. That was really interesting, and definitely a lot of I recognized a lot of the challenges that you've had. One of the things that I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about was that unseen work in the innovation aspect of having the incubator. Have you figured out a way to measure that? Because I'm noticing as we're starting an accelerator that a lot of our goals are going to be extremely hard for us to measure success with. It's making sure that game studios stop doing what they're doing because they're never going to have a success, but then pivot into something else. And I don't know how to start tracking that and showing that we have that influence on the industry, I guess.
Yeah, it's an important question. It's something that I've been struggling with, because if I could measure somehow all the useful meetings that came from our events, or all the follow-up of all the introduction that I've made and my colleagues have made, and if I could connect the success rate to the quality of those connections, if that was all measurable, it would be an amazing data set. And if I had been able to do that, I might have still been funded.
Yeah.
I think it's especially the soft stuff. So there have been new companies emerging from Indigo because two people met at Indigo and started a new company, and they wouldn't have met if we hadn't organized Indigo. So there's all these, but I mean, there's no way for me to keep track of that. So that's really me and my colleagues would have to be connected to blockchain somehow if we could wanted to trace all this stuff. So there's an element of difficulty in terms of, so when you come to hard KPIs, it's always companies, turnover, jobs, and maybe projects or products, but that's only like 10% of what makes you valuable. So to basically, like right now we're putting together sort of a booklet, a report on everything that we've done, but it's taken a lot of time, but we're doing it now. If we'd been able to do that every year, maybe that would have been easier. I think if I look at now what we're doing, but we're also going to have anecdotal information. So people who sent us an email, like, I found my first job and we're going to put all that in this one little booklet. But that answers the question. The problem is, if you want to do it well, it takes you a lot of time that you don't have. So there's a real challenge. There's a real challenge there in terms of how much do you. So we've operated on trust. By the government trusted us that we were doing a good job, and we had some KPIs. But we would all somehow, if I invited government to one of our events, end of discussion. If they came to a lunch or if they came to an Indigo, then I didn't need to show them any more numbers. If they could see the vibe of going on, it's like, whoa, what's all this? They're like, whoa, this is amazing. Every month, really? 120 people every month? And then their eyes would go like open. And during COVID, we were struggling with funding discussions because we couldn't invite people to events. There was no, so the tangibility of our efforts was really hard to prove during the COVID years as well. And that's when some of our trouble relationship with the province started. Yeah. So I don't have a closing argument for that. I just think it's one of the hardest parts of this job.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm really interested in reading that booklet, because one of my notes that I wrote down here was like, should maybe JP write a book about this?
Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah. I thought about that, but well, I mean, we're going to put together at least a sort of a results book, so that will be available later this year, at the end of this year. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. I'll leave the floor. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Hi, hello, Mihailo from Serbian Games Association. So
Hi.
I really love the presentation.
Thank you.
Currently, we're at the point where we are considering starting something similar to what you've done, because we feel that the current ecosystem needs this. There's a lot of indies, and we need them to transition to mindies, which is, I think, a great term. I haven't heard it before. And you're completely true. They don't know what they don't know. But I'm curious, now we are thinking about, like, should this be tied to some funding, or should it be, without that? And what the feedback which we are currently getting from the indies we're targeting is, unless there is some kind of funding, they feel that all this education is just taking up their valuable time away from development. To just talk to them about the stuff, which is, let's say, boring. They don't need that. They don't need that now, or so on. So how did you get, let's say, the initial wave of applicants or entrants, who then, I think, once they learned and saw the value, I think, then the word spreads naturally. But like, how did you overcome this barrier where they don't know what they don't know, and they don't feel that the time spent in incubation is time, well spent?
Yeah. Well, I think, as you can see, and I mean, I saw somebody here from Sweden Game Arena, who I don't see anymore, but you can see a monthly program with 1 day a month. That's not very heavy. If you're not willing to do that, then don't join the incubation program. If that's too much for you, then this is not for you, right? So you're not gonna get. But we have done more intensive programs where 1-2 days a week for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and man, I really had to pull people out of their little cages to get them into the program, and I also realized that they don't see the value of it yet, and they are. So one of the ways we solve this is to make it a lighter program with between those monthly days there would be a chance to interact through Discord, and or to drop in to talk to our incubation manager. And then case by case, we've done a lot of sort of coaching. But that's a difficult question. There's another way to do it, is to say, look, if you have money, it's like if you're offering money, then it's easier to make them do it, right? So if an acceleration program with a promise of maybe a 50K at the end of a 3-month period, then it's easier because they realize, oh, there's something that I can gain from this other than just advice. So it also depends on the setting and the place where you are. Are you in a city, or where are you based?
Yeah, in Belgrade. So
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
the major hub. So most of
Yeah.
them are there.
Yeah.
And I think now there's a lot of programs which are not aimed at gaming, but
Yeah.
they get
Yeah.
into them.
Right.
And the feedback we get, oh yeah, we're hearing the same talks like in every single startup program, and we're kind of tired of hearing the same talks all over again. Like, we're there
Right.
because they're giving 20K for 2 months, or they're giving 50K for 6 months, and then we have to go there and listen to it because otherwise we don't get the money. But we don't feel it's valuable. Like, most of them are still working somewhere, and this is let's say another passion project job on the side, and they're like feeling this is taking too much.
That is an issue. I do think that if you're serious about having a games company, then don't combine it with a 4-day job. That's that's not realistic. Then our incubation program is not for you, right? So I do think that they should make it a full-time profession. And then look, if they work somewhere for a day and a half, doing, I don't know, some coding or something, that's okay. But we're trying to stay away from companies who sort of do this on the side. Yeah.
Thank you. Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm next here with Christine from the league.
Yeah.
And hi, Jeffy. Thank you very
Hi.
much for your presentation. I really like that idea, this metaphor of the oil and the ecosystem. And I think I'm super dismayed about Dutch Games Garden closing down because they
Mm.
were the role model for the past 7 years for the projects we've been doing.
Yeah.
And definitely for initiating the league, because I think you started something, a network between hubs, like you tried it in 2015 or something, I remember, and then it failed after a year because lack of funding, lack of time. But this
Yeah.
thing about the oil, being the oil, and this thing about going out and beyond being an incubator or an accelerator, but actually establishing a regional ecosystem, because you have the associations that are on top and national, etc. But then you have the incubator, and the community might sort of be happening, and there might be some kind of organization that volunteers doing some kind of meetups or whatever every month. But an organized ecosystem organization that includes all, as you have included, workspace, incubation, acceleration, events, all these things, they happen like in Seventer because they have, of course, the ecosystem is also physically together, yeah. And of course, Seventer and you have been both, Dutch Game Garden have been both the role models for going beyond the pure incubation thing. But I still feel that what is lacking somehow is this, what you've been doing, but what you're also saying, this working on being a lobby, a strong lobby, and not only in terms of convincing why games are good, but helping with the mindset, because you now get, we saw that in Berlin, you now get people who actually, from their age, as politicians, are playing games.
Yeah.
And this is a new generation coming up that we need to grab. And the lobby can not just be, oh, games are good. Or you make a lot of money with games. I also like the thing that you mentioned, that actually the stabilizing factor of economics, of the economy contributed by the game industry lies not in investment-ready companies. I think these are things that need to be again put forth. And again, the value of games as a manifold value, not only a monetary value, and not only in serious games, as you said, is so important. But there are not enough people, in my understanding, that focus on this role, that think about the industry as an industry. They think about how to help the team. It's always about how to help the individual team, which is a super effort, and not say, don't want to minimize that, but there are not enough people who actually think about the industry in a relation to a really hands-on working with so the national ones are doing a big job, but it's a bit abstract, if you like. And there's nobody in between. And sometimes, if there are people in between, those helpers who are not developing themselves anymore or have never developed themselves, even worse, people like me, for example, I came into the industry and I thought, like, wow, that is such a sharing, open, participating industry, until I met people like me. And they were sharks. And the helpers are the worst. They are not sharing. They are, at least in some communities, they are not really sharing. They are like, I'm the better helper. And they are using their elbows. At least that is in Berlin. That's been happening. I was totally shocked by this, because that level, who would actually, if they act together, really be a strong lobby, they were competing amongst each other. Is that network organization more important than the other one? And the university is having a network of their own that competes with the other network. And you think, like, as you say, universities and the university should work with incubators and not only have their own incubator. So this is something, and that's why I'm so shocked that Dutch Game Garden, who is doing exactly that.
I think, Christine, I think part of the reason why we think we were successful is that we stacked all these different things, and we had all these angles. At the same time, it's made us harder to understand. And so I think sometimes, because if I look at the regional incubator that is in our city, they only focus on incubation and getting funding. And they were successful in that. Now, of course, you know that a lot of developers are not as scalable as some sort of tech solutions for whatever problem. So they had an advantage over the investor readiness of their companies. but also they only did one thing, so they really truly were an incubator. And I think the multifaceted angle character of our organization has also sometimes maybe been the reason for a downfall, because nobody could quite, what are you like, what, what if KPIs for incubators were compared to our KPIs, then we wouldn't score as high as other incubators. But if you look at the total impact of what, and if you could measure that, we're going back to Lynn's question, if you could measure the true impact, then we could easily prove what we're worth. But that was difficult. So, and we did some things that a branch organization should do, right? Like data on the industry, that should really be done by the branch organization. But that has to do with the size of the company, of the organization, the industry in the Netherlands. But I mean, I understand what you're saying, Christine, and I think there's a lot of invisible work that is hard to, and that's why the metaphor of the oil works, because it's like, nobody thinks of oil when you think of an engine. Everybody always thinks about the mechanical parts, and that's why I like that metaphor. But it's part of it is also sometimes hard for us to prove who we are. I think that I believe in this stack, but if I find a way to sell this better, I will let you know, because that's one of the things that I've struggled with for the last few years.
Hello, everybody. I think I'm next for a question. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So I'm Guillaume. I'm from Games Brussels. We're running a co-working space / incubator in Brussels. Thank you so much for the presentation. I've been to the Lunch Network a couple of times.
Yeah.
It's really great. Hopefully I'm here next time. But I had two questions for you. Like, one is linked to the we said the landscape of other incubators that you had in the Netherlands. Like, how did you manage collaboration between them? Because sometimes these initiatives, it wasn't the case, but these initiatives can be linked to political will or political pressure, and sometimes difficult to manage because then the agenda of these people might be different from yours. And the second question was linked to you briefly talked about Erasmus program and exchange, and something that we're really interested in to diving or trying here. I don't know if you had any info about that or feedback or anything you could share on that subject.
Oh, okay. So can you go back? There was two questions, right? So
yeah.
Can you reiterate them briefly so I don't get them all mixed up?
Okay, cool. So the first one is like, how did you manage your collaboration with the other incubators in the Netherlands? And the second one is linked to the what was the Erasmus program like? How did you manage it, and what was the feedback of it, like the return on investment, I would say?
Right. Okay. So the first one is, well, there was only one real other incubator in the Netherlands at one point in Groningen, the north, in Utopia, and that ran for a little while. And we knew the guys, and we talked to them sometime a little bit. And then Corona happened, and then I think something went wrong there, and they discontinued. So that there's not been much to collaborate with. The organization that we've probably collaborated with most is our branch organization, Dutch Game Association. And that's been good, but there was some funny moments where we were both trying to get money from the national government, and that sort of led to sort of competing interests, right? And that's part of why my mission towards national funding became a little complex last year, because hey, we're and then all of a sudden people will say, oh, but you're a regional incubator, so. But we were doing so much for the entire industry that it was kind of complex. But in the end, we knew the people well. But there was for a moment last year that I thought, hey, are we competing here? This is not very helpful and handy. So I'm very much relational driven. So I tend to really try and solve it with individual relations and talks, and we managed to go through it. We've had a weekly lobby call every week on Friday for a half hour with our branch organization for the last 2 years. So, and that's definitely helped in getting sort of a collective sense of common goal. Yeah. So that's one. The other thing about Erasmus is Erasmus is. Does that answer the first question, Guillaume? Yeah, and Erasmus is really teaching the teacher, right? So it's that's sort of the theme. Yeah, I mean, when Denmark was starting a program, Sweden Game Arena was there. That's Malin. That's your it's a Science Park Kufta, and we were like the first ones, and so Denmark wanted something similar. So they wanted to learn from us. So we were involved in an Erasmus. Wow, it's 10 years ago. It's a long time ago, and we basically shared everything that we up to then had tried and how it worked. And I think the Danish ended up modeling their own program, sort of based on what happened in Sweden and a little bit on what we did. And that's been useful and helpful. And one of the things I loved about the Erasmus is that it got us together to talk about something quite unique. That is really that's why these calls are really important. It's like there's not many people doing this, and the game industry has its own unique, weird characteristics in terms of the people and the companies, and it's great to share with this. Many times I've wanted to get this group and others together physically to have a two-day session, and it's really fundamental because it's also kind of a lonely task doing game incubation, or game acceleration. Yeah. But Erasmus, I think, is a great program. It got us together, and we tried for Horizon as well, but those are a lot harder to get. And with the Danish and the Swedish, we've tried, I think, a couple times to do more in the past. And then, of course, there's the calls that the Danish and the Swedish can use that we cannot use because we're not in the Baltic Sea or something else. So not everything is always possible, but I really believe in those interactions. Yeah. Well, we're getting to the end of the call, I think. I just want to make sure that you all feel free to contact me if you want to talk more, or I will. It's a bit of a weird time for us. To shut down an organization is even more complex than organizing a game event. So I think, but I will be available at some point if people want to reach out to me. I've just shared my email address again. And Christine, I think I'm going to see you in November, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
We're happy to have you. And actually,
Yeah.
I will just write to you about another perhaps event that you could join.
Yeah.
Help us with.
Yeah.
Can I well, because this is being recorded, it's perhaps a bit cheeky to ask that, but what would have been the most important things to be funded if you had managed to get this to continue? Is it I think we have somebody from Game Lift here from Hamburg, and I don't know if it's still like that. Dennis is here. Oh no, he left. But I remember that Game City Hamburg used to, I'm not sure if it's still the case, that they used to just pay the staff. And that was their contribution. And everything else, the staff managed to get through entries, through rent, and create workspace. And the staff was then there to organize this ecosystem and to offer also the incubation, which they also, I think, had a very restrictive, very lean way of doing it. So what is the main thing you would need the regional funding for?
Yeah, I mean, staff is definitely the most important because it's usually also the highest percentage of your expenses. And it's what's really, I wish I could have had more. Like, I prefer to have less money, but for longer commitments than these short funded programs where you have 2 or 3 years and then all of a sudden, boom, it's gone. And I think one of the reasons why we ended up also, Crystal and I spent the last 5 years every year. We spent a disproportionate amount of time to get funding renegotiated every year, and it became such a big part of our job that we felt like we were spending too much time on survival. So stability. I mean, if a government comes to me and says, "What should we do?" I prefer to say, have a long-term plan, And you know, I mean, this is ideal, and like a 10-year program would be wonderful, but that of course never happens. But you know, I really think stability is a big thing, and I think the people is where it starts. You always will need some out-of-pocket money, and you will need some money for rent and things like that. But the staff is definitely the main thing. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. I do need to catch a train to get out of here. Just let me know if there's any other things that are sort of going around your head, and I'd be happy even to have a discussion sometime in the future again about this stuff. You know, but for now, I think this is what I had to say. There's a lot more to say, but someday I hope to run into you all and have some more time. But thank you for this opportunity, Deepak, Nipun, and Show. So.
Yeah, thank you
All
so
right.
much, JP, for the insightful presentation on behalf of IGDA and SIG and start of the knowledge series. Your
Yep.
wealth of experience and comprehensive knowledge significantly enhanced the session. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
And
All right.
thank you to all the
Thank you.
participants for
Thanks for all your
attending.
thanks for all your questions. And
Awesome.
when we're finished and our little booklet comes out, I'll let you know.
Yeah. All right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye bye.